I'm Stephen Ridgway. Duolingo users, 2.6 million Duolingo users have had data leaked via a hacking forum. Duolingo is one of the world's largest language learning sites. It's got, I think, certainly over 74 million monthly users worldwide. It appears, however, that a badly secured API interface has allowed data to be scraped from the backend systems. Now, some of this data is meant to be scraped. It's meant to be available. Users' public profiles and things. However, what I don't think the developers of the API realized was that if you send the API an email address, it then tells you whether that email address is registered or not. So in that way, it's possible through just spraying or effectively to work out which public profiles are associated with which email addresses. Now, okay, this isn't perhaps the worst leak that there's ever been from the point of view of the information that's been taken. However, it highlights a point that I've been concerned about for a very long time. I think in probably it must have been in about 2018, I remember giving a talk saying that API security is going to be the next big thing from the point of view of hackers accessing stuff that they shouldn't. It's taken a little bit longer than I expected before it's really kicked off, but we are definitely in a world where now securing your APIs is absolutely critical, as critical as any of your other web apps or any of your other internet-facing systems. So I also think that the vulnerabilities, not necessarily vulnerabilities as in patch it type things, but the vulnerabilities as in unless you code it right, this can have unforeseen consequences. It's an area which is less well understood, and certainly I think there is in fact a gap between developers' understandings of these things and the cybersecurity infosec world's understanding of these things. So, just as a thought, if you're going to be doing penetration testing on web-facing apps, make sure that you are using methodologies or pen test organizations that have a very solid understanding about breaking APIs, and definitely make sure that APIs are included in your regular penetration testing. And that should probably also become part of the process in your development lifecycle before something goes live. Make sure you haven't regressed anything on an API in the same way that you make sure you haven't regressed anything on any other part of the web app. Duolingo users. If you are a Duolingo user, I mean, you may not be particularly worried if your email address is now associated with your public profile. I can't see how that would be particularly valuable information. But any information about you can be used to make phishing or spear phishing more effective, and all information that's identifiable or can lead to the identification of a human. Of course, obviously covered as PII under GDPR and so on and so forth. So quite rightly there are protections around this sort of stuff, because it isn't that it doesn't matter at all. It's just how much does it matter? And I think you are the only one that can risk assess that one. So, interesting article on dark reading that I came across this morning. An organization called Spin AI has done a risk assessment of 300,000 browser extensions, um, and has discovered that um, over 50% of them have privileges which would allow for malicious actions to be taken on the device via the browser. Um, so this is, I think, where does one go with this? If nearly so, yes, there has been some changes recently, haven't there, to what browser extensions have to admit they do before they get installed. So it should be easier to understand um, what it is. Now, I think one of the scary thing is though that nobody seems to be looking into this particularly carefully. Certainly from um, only a handful of corporates that I know, and almost no SMEs, are actually um, taking time to either manage or to at least get visibility of what browser extensions users have installed into their browsers. According to this piece of research, more than a third of the extensions present a high risk. As in, the extension has the ability to do things like exfiltrate data, download and run things, this sort of stuff. And even more scarily, it does appear that um, uh, about 50% of the extensions installed were productivity related extensions. And actually, a large proportion of them were from anonymous authors. So this whole area around managing browser extensions perhaps is something um, that it may be worth having some a revisit and a little bit more of a focus on. I certainly going to take this one away and discuss it internally at that security company around what the approach should be to these things, because there is a trade-off between functionality and security, in the sense that if you simply ban a whole load of stuff, users will be incredibly innovative about getting around whatever it is that you've banned, and will probably start doing things that are worse than the things that you're trying to stop them doing anyway. Or at least they're not monitorable in the ways that you would expect them to be. So, quite frankly, I used to think that if users put as much effort into doing their job as they did into getting around the rules, everybody would be so much more productive. But there we go. So yeah, I definitely want to think about. And there are applications that you can use which give you visibility into endpoint visibility. Nice open source one that I regularly use is OS Query, and that can at least produce you reports on what extensions have been added into browsers on endpoints. So it is possible without too much trouble to at least create an inventory of what's out there to support any strategy around controlling this sort of stuff. Probably actually be quite an interesting report to pull in most organisations. So yeah, it's definitely worth having to think about this. If that many applications have got rights and privileges which are above those that you would normally want for a user-controlled piece of software, then definitely more research is needed and more thought needs to be put into this, and we should certainly be doing that. And then finally from me today, yet again, cloud stuff. The US government defense contractor Belcan left its super admin credentials open to the public via an open Kibana instance. So good question as to how nobody noticed that Kibana and the back-end Elastic stack was open to the internet but unsecured is a good question. Raises questions about asset management and so on and so forth within their organization. It also raises questions around how thorough any security testing, external security testing has been. However, the leaked data included admin emails, admin passwords, hashed with bcrypt, admin usernames, admin roles, internal network addresses, internal infrastructure host names and IP addresses, and more interestingly, internal infrastructure vulnerabilities and actions taken to remedy or not remedy them. Now, excuse me, combining those things is potentially leaves them with a significant risk, I would say. So bcrypt hashing of passwords is generally pretty good. It is reasonably brute force resistant, but that is dependent, as always, on the passwords being long and complex. Because even a well encrypted, simple dictionary password will get broken in next to no time. So, I think according to the report, with the settings on the password encryption, if you were literally just to brute force it, it would take 22 years at a decent clock speed to. If the password isn't long and complex, that will be significantly reduced. And if it's a dictionary word, then you're in trouble. Assuming they're not, but the internal infrastructure vulnerabilities, you really don't want your internal infrastructure vulnerabilities known to people who may have malicious intent. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but in my experience, a lot of organizations don't treat their pen test results as confidential, as properly confidential information. They don't put security around the reports that perhaps they should do. So I think there are two lessons learned from this. One is, yes, again, things left on the internet in cloud environments that aren't secured. So, yeah, keep on top of that. That's basic hygiene. But how do you secure your vulnerability reports and vulnerability trackers? It's something I think that is absolutely, definitely worth putting some time and effort into. I know if I was to compromise an organization and I was trawling around looking for, the usual sorts of stuff, one of the things that I would be looking for is whether there's any information about vulnerabilities, because that could make my life a whole load easier. At the point where the compromise is noticed and the defenders are looking to do the usual container replicate, recover stuff. Well, if I'm as is, it can be leading them a right merry dance around their own environments and probably potentially even get away with it, and effectively give myself a backdoor to come back into later, that sort of thing. So two lessons learned. One, don't put stuff on the internet that's unprotected unless you intend it to be there and unprotected. And secondly, yes, getting vulnerability reports and getting pen test reports and so on is really important from the perspective of managing your basic cyber hygiene. However, be very careful with where that information is stored and who's got access to it, because that stuff is gold dust to attackers. That is everything from me for today. Hope you have a great Wednesday. It's pizza night for me. So hopefully you'll be having a good day, and I will speak to you all again